I want you to move from overwhelmed by information to confident in what really matters. I want to help you move from being unsure towards direction and purpose in your healthcare. I want to introduce you to health experts. I want to let you in on tough conversations on women's health. I want to give you a place where you can lean in and learn how to take care of yourself. Let's transform your health. Let's get clear on your goals. This is Women's Health Unplugged. I'm your host, Dr. Jordan Robertson, naturopathic doctor. Knowing is different than doing. Today I wanted to focus on some skill building discussion. After all the years of watching women be either successful or not that successful with their health plans in my practice, I have figured out that there are probably some very specific traits that women possess or skills that they have spent time cultivating that really have a positive impact on whether or not they're successful in their health plan. And interesting, when I sat down to sort of make this list for us today, I realized that so many of these skills are actually inherent in many of my entrepreneurial women. So I think what we learn when we watch entrepreneurs is that they figure out how to solve problems. They, sort of thrive really on solving problems. And they need to develop a skill set that gets them from point A to point B at all costs, right? So they have a dream, they have a passion, they have an area of expertise that they want to share with the world. And their drive to make those dreams a reality requires them to have sort of these basic skills that if we look at some of the things that we wish or we want women to start to cultivate in their health journey, the skills are not that different. So the title of the episode today actually, is more about how do we borrow some of the skills of our entrepreneurial female friends or women who are, self-employed, who, know how to take the world by storm with their ideas and their projects and their desires and their dreams. How do we borrow the skills that those women have in their work and apply it to our lives? How do we take the skills that those women need to make money at their passion and use it to better understand the cost of our time as women? How do we use those examples of women overcoming difficulty, of them harnessing skills to leverage themselves? How do we use that so that you can leverage yourself in your own journey towards better health? And that's really what I want to focus on today. It's interesting because commonly I'll get asked, I get asked often actually to do podcasts on time management. I think because from the outside, it probably looks like I have incredible time management skills to be able to, produce the kind of content that we produce, work with the number of women one-on-one that I work with, to support the team that I have, that, inherently there must be some built-in time management skills. And I can imagine some of my university professors, rolling their eyes, listening to this conversation, because those, time management as it, is traditionally thought of is not actually one of my skills. But yet I've had to figure out how to, I always keep using the word leverage, because really, as a woman, you're only like one person, right? And if you want to have this great impact, you actually need to harness the people around you. You need to strategize. You need to have infrastructure. So it's not just about writing in your agenda what you're going to do from 9 to 10 in the morning, and then from 10 to 11 in the morning, and then from 11 to 12 in the morning. That's not really what time management needs for this bigger project of your health, or this bigger project of living your life on your terms and the way that you want. We actually need a deeper look at some beliefs that we have about our worth. We need to look a little bit deeper about questioning some of the norms that we can so easily sort of fall into as far as, women and mothers. So that's the conversation I want to have today. I want to walk through what I think are these three sort of most valuable skills that, certainly non-self-employed or entrepreneurial women may have, but are requirement for successful female entrepreneurs. And I think we can borrow those skills and apply them to you working on your health goals, because this is also a project that you have passion for, that you may or may not have all the skills to do, that you probably don't have 15 hours a week to carve out time for. So how can we borrow what we've learned from watching female leaders and female entrepreneurs and put it into practice in every woman's health journey and health plan so that she can show up in her life the way that she wants to? So the first thing that our female entrepreneurs do or know is that she knows really what her time is worth. And I don't just mean from an hourly perspective, although if you ask most female entrepreneurs, she probably knows the answer to that question too. But she knows that her time is her most valuable asset. And because of that, can often be quite protective of her time and or uses strategies to protect her time and also to free up her time for doing things that put her into that flow state that she needs to be in order to drive forward her projects or her passion. And I think even as a non-entrepreneur, this would probably make sense. So if we had an artist, for example, who, all of her income and her passion and moving forward in her dreams was painting, right? Every hour that she's not doing that, she is digressing away from moving everything forward, right? Her painting is the bottleneck, we call it, where, if she doesn't paint, then there's nothing to sell and there's nothing to share with the world. And I think we can sort of easily see that, right? That if, Sally, our painter, was so bogged down with tidying up her brushes, with responding to inquiries to come and visit her paintings, that, she had to pick her children up from school early, if, all these things that got in the way of her painting, then maybe Sally is only producing one picture a month. And suddenly her, we've sort of reached this limit where she's incapable of producing more of her passion, more of what she wants to share with the world. And certainly it's limiting her income if she can only finish one painting per month. And I'm sorry to all the artists who are listening, I have no idea how long it takes to paint a picture. Maybe it takes 5 months and I'm making the math on this make no sense. But you can see that example, where she is the only one who can produce the paintings that are authored by her, and yet she has so many other tasks that it takes for her to operate her, her brand and her painting business. And very easily we could say, well, you could probably find a junior painter who would happily paint your brushes, Sally, so that you can spend more time on the thing you love and the thing that's really driving this whole thing forward. Right? I think from the outside, it's easy to say, Sally, why don't you have your kids stay in an after-school program 2 days per week, and you can paint a little longer on those days, right? From the outside, it's easy for us to see that Sally has this major time crunch to producing her work. And what successful female entrepreneurs do is that they are constantly looking for the parts of their time that they are putting in that are really not pushing forward what the actual goal is, right? They easily delegate tasks. They easily hire in underneath them to do tasks that they don't have to do, right? Anyone can clean a brush, but only Sally can paint. And so it's easy when we look at it from that example to see why it would be so much more valuable for Sally to hire someone to paint her brushes so that she can keep producing the big ticket item. I think when we look at our health, we have a harder time making that trade. And I think because the gains that we're trying to make in our health are not as linear as let's produce more paintings so Sally can produce more paintings. It's harder for women to understand why, carving out an hour for themselves to go to the gym and paying someone else to clean their house, that doesn't always feel like the right trade, right? Because different than when we're talking in business, it's very much about the numbers. But when we're talking about your health and we're trying to claw back time, one of the things that I think successful female entrepreneurs do that we should probably borrow from them is that they know the cost of that hour of them not working towards the goal, right? Sally's calculated if she pays someone to clean her brushes and she paints a picture instead, that's a very valuable exchange. But I don't think we have as easy of a time as understanding the value that comes from delegating tasks away so that you can spend time on your health, right? It's not as easy for women to say, I'm going to invest or pay for tasks to be done so that I can recoup that time to work on my health project. It's a more difficult trade, right? Because we're not seeing that like exact dollar back and forth. But entrepreneurial women will see that them going to the gym actually makes sense from a dollars and cents perspective, right? And so that's where they have that ability because they're doing this all the time, right? They're doing this all the time to say, what tasks can I delegate to someone else? What things am I doing that I don't need to be doing or that someone else could do for me? Or maybe there is a simpler way to have these things actually be done so that they can leverage their time in another direction that actually moves the whole project forward. So when we're thinking about your health, right, it could be something as simple as buying pre-cut veggies, right? For sure, you can cut your own veggies, right? But if we recoup some of the time that you're currently taking to cut your own vegetables, then is it possible, right, that you can actually do more and work harder towards what your actual goal is? Because your actual deep goal is not to cut the veggies. Your deep goal might include eating more veggies, right? And so how can we streamline that process so that your time is better leveraged? And now that you don't have to cut any of the veggies, do you have the bandwidth to, do something else, right? Do you have the bandwidth to cook some protein that goes with those veggies if you didn't have to cut them, right? And so I know these are kind of simple examples, but it's that different way of thinking that if you are freeing up your time, can you be using it for a task that actually gives you greater output than some of these smaller tasks that perhaps don't really need to be done? The other thing that I think that entrepreneurs will do well is that they often will repeat sort of less than perfect actions because it's very time consuming and expensive to revamp things, probably more expensive and time consuming than it is to perform a less than perfect action. So let me just say that in a different way so that it's clearer. Entrepreneurs know that the outcome or the finished product is very important. And the ability to have sort of that reproducible, mediocre outcome is actually okay in many instances, where I think often we can be paralyzed by perfecting our process. We can be paralyzed by perfecting the product that we're trying to achieve, so much so that it actually takes up an enormous amount of time in perfecting this task when perhaps even the task that we're trying to perfect is not terribly important after all. So a good example is like, say, your smoothie recipe in the morning. So the sort of more entrepreneurial way to look at it is it needs to have protein, it needs to have fruit, it needs to have vegetables. And if the combination that you put together isn't perfect, we probably still drink it, right? Drink it, move on, and say, the next time I go grocery shopping, I'm going to try something different. That wasn't perfect, but I'm not going to slow down. I'm not going to spend 5 hours on the internet trying to find a better smoothie recipe. I'm not going to dump this one out. I'm just going to drink it and move on, right? Because they can see in their work that there are moments where perfection is important. And then there are a lot of moments where perfection is actually a time suck, where they're spending so much time going back over, re-recording videos, rewriting emails, and their time is too precious actually to do those things. And so they're way less likely to be constantly evaluating what's going on and will just do it and move forward. And so I can often see in my patients when they're trying to embark on something new that they spend so much time in that perfection phase where they're trying to perfect the smoothie, right? That one didn't work. It didn't taste great. So tomorrow I like the next day, they just didn't do it, right? Because it didn't taste perfect, or I didn't like it quite as much as my omelet. So the next day I didn't do it. Or I ran out of peaches and I always put peaches in. And so the next day I didn't do it, right? And not that we want all food to be this sort of utilitarian view of it. However, there are moments that certainly don't demand the amount of attention and thought and refining as we're giving it, right? Imagine how much freedom you could have if you did approach some of those tasks a little bit more with the mindset that mediocre is kind of good enough, right? Because that actually would free up your time. And that's what the entrepreneur is doing, right? That's what she's doing when she says this smoothie's gross, but it's okay. I'll try again next week. I'm going to use up these ingredients that are in the fridge and I'm still going to make it and I'm still going to drink it. And she's doing that in other tasks, through her work. But when we're applying it to your health, that actually removes the barrier of thinking about which perfect running shoes do you need to go for a walk, right? Do you have the right equipment to go to a boot camp class? Do you have the right cut of chicken to meet your macros, right? All of those things are cool and they can be important. But if you notice that your time is your most expensive asset, then spending time on the internet trying to find a better smoothie recipe actually isn't a good use of your time, right? It's much better to have performed mediocre, close, the word is there. You know what I mean? It's much better to have made a mediocre smoothie and move on, because it actually removes the paralysis of trying to figure out what perfection looks like and reclaims some of the time that you're spending on that task so that you can use that time towards your greater and higher purpose. Again, your greater and higher purpose in your health plan is not to make a perfect smoothie. It's not to cut the vegetables. It's to have a smoothie and have vegetables. And so however you can do that actually recoups some of your time is important. The last thing that I think from a time perspective that entrepreneurial women do well is that they realize that if they miss a day of work, that it's awfully expensive. And that's important because back to what I was saying earlier, where that trade of, paying someone to clean your house while you go to the gym is hard, right? It's hard to think of because it sounds like we're not talking about the same currency, right? We're talking about time and we're talking about money. It's much easier when we're talking about time and time or money and money, where you can sort of see this equal trade. But if you hold in the highest regard, you working towards your best self, your highest self, your goal, whatever it is that you've set, it actually does become a fair trade. And what the entrepreneurial woman realizes is that if she misses a day of work, right, if the team that relies on her to be her best can't, that her ability to rely on herself is actually one of her most important assets, that she wakes up every day and feels well. And so she's figured out how to take the things that make her feel well and work them into her plan and trade money for those things, or trade time for those things, or trade perfection for those things, so that she can maintain them kind of at all costs, right? Like making sure that it's a high priority so that she can maintain it, no matter what. But she sees that as an equal trade. For her, it's an easy decision. If I go to the gym, if I make a salad, I miss work less, right? Which if missing work or missing the day or not feeling her best is interfering with her ability to pursue her passions and her goals, then that's a very expensive trade, right? And I don't just mean in the money sense. I mean that's not it's not a good trade, right? To not feel well. And so I think sitting back, when you start to look at your schedule and your time, some of the strategies that I have found particularly helpful is to make lists of things that I do, right? Tasks that I do. I've also done quite a bit of time tracking for myself over the years. And even some of my coaches have had me look at where my time is going so that we can restructure and look at how to delegate tasks differently or more often or more efficiently. And actually start to ask yourself the question, number one, am I the only person who can do this task, right? I am the only person who can put my daughter to bed. Well, and that's not totally true, but I'm trying to think of an example that I don't want anyone else to do. Maybe that's a better way to say it. Are there tasks that I want to do myself or that I'm the only person that is capable of doing? I am the only person who is capable of treating my patients most of the time. I am the only person who wants to put my daughter to bed, or I am the person who I want to put my daughter to bed, right? Keep those on the list. What are things that we do that we don't have to do? What are things that we do that we hate doing? What are things that we're doing that the frequency at which we're doing them is actually a made up strategy or schedule, and we could actually do them less often or more efficiently or differently, right? How could we leverage technology? How could we leverage the people that are in our circle? How could we leverage the expertise of other people? And that's going to lend us into strategy number 2. So the second thing that my entrepreneurial female friends do very well is realize that they do not have to be the expert at everything as it pertains to their business, and very easily are willing to hire the professional opinion, the professional practice, the skill set of other human beings or technology to help them with all of the things that they're struggling with in their business. And not even just struggling, maybe that's not even the right way to put it. They realize that their success hinges on their leveraging the skills of other people. Right? So if we go back to Sally, she's a wonderful painter, knows nothing about business, knows nothing about accounting, right? Knows nothing about commercial real estate. Maybe she doesn't even know anything about auctions or, art sales. She's the artist. And when we think about your health plan and, you probably are living in a body that you don't have a full operator's manual for, and there's lots of things about your health that you're not completely sure of. There's also a lot about health plans that involve things like psychology and mindset and strategy and coaching and things that, as an individual, we might not be likely to do or accomplish on our own, as well as if we started to hire out or outsource some of the skills of people and professionals around us to help us understand what our next move should actually look like. It's interesting, in my practice, often naturopathic medicine is covered by extended health plans, and patients may have partial coverage from private insurance that offsets the cost of their appointments. And it's remarkable to me what percentage of my patients actually don't have health insurance at all. And that group of women who seek out support and care, who have no, partial coverage or no support from their employer, they are often entrepreneurial women, right? Because like I said earlier, she realizes that missing a day of work is awfully expensive. But the other thing that she's realizing as she makes that decision to invest in her health and get a team member and have someone on her side to actually help her navigate her health challenges is that all of the answers to her questions don't necessarily live inside of her, right? She's willing to acknowledge that she has a particular skill set and expertise and knowledge base that sometimes the problem that she needs to solve sort of falls outside of what she knows. Or maybe she doesn't even have interest in figuring out or the time to figure out what an actual solution looks like. And for her, it's a much better trade to have someone be on her team that knows some of those answers and can expedite her feeling better by, I'm going to use the word leverage again, leveraging the expertise and skills of the people around her to help her accomplish her goals. And when I say leveraging, the people around her, I don't mean Dr. Google. So that's the one thing that I feel like my, sort of archetype entrepreneurial female does, is that she recognizes what true expertise looks like and is willing to invest in that expertise in order to get some kind of outcome, or she's willing to invest in some kind of accountability for herself so that she can, again, achieve that outcome. Many entrepreneurial women, even ones that you imagine being at the top of their game, leaders in their industry, often have a coach, right? And even when I think about myself, and an example I can give is that every single vacation I've ever taken ever, I've paid for some accountability with a personal trainer. And I've done that even though I have a full gym set up, even though I can find workouts online, even though, right? Like technically, I have all of the skills and tools. I have lots of motivation. And yet, I needed to have another human being be part of my solution so that I could actually execute and show up and do all of that work, because it wasn't good enough for me to just do it by myself. I think sometimes as women, we can get trapped in this idea that we need to do all of the things, we need to be all of the people. And I'm going to throw and know all of the things in the same breath. In generations past, because we didn't have access to the internet or access to all of the information that we have at our fingertips now, people would sit around the dining room table and discuss topics like health. And often it was the person who was the most confident, who spoke the clearest, maybe was the loudest, that would be sort of declared the expert in a particular topic. So, you can think about your parents' generation, everybody's sitting around having an espresso after dinner, and they get on the conversation of health, right? And none of them have the training or background to validate what they're saying. They're mostly speaking from experience. And yet at that time, that was really all they had. And so they would rarely seek the expertise of a professional in the health and wellness industry, and often, base their decision-making around these sort of kitchen table conversations. I can certainly think of times where maybe in my youth, part of my health journey from my parents was maybe dictated based on what other parents were doing, right? And not necessarily maybe what was on complete fact. But funnily, the internet hasn't completely changed the game there. We would assume that it would, right? Because now we can sit around that dining room table and we have the access to thousands and thousands of articles on the topic that we're trying to learn about. And certainly in some cases, it's probably helped. I remember being a child at the cottage and I had a rash. I was allergic to the lake water. And I remember my mom holding my arm up and showing my rash to all of the women of the cottage, in the bay. And there were women that were in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And then my mom, who I think at the time was in her 30s. And all of these women are inspecting this rash, trying to make a decision about whether or not my rash was ringworm or whether it was hives. And I have this distinct memory of all of these women sort of speculating where, probably with the advent of the internet, one of them would have whipped out their phone and looked up pictures of skin rashes, and maybe they would have come to a better conclusion. So you would think that having the advent of the internet, that actually has meant that women have better access to information and that they still can become their best expert. But I'm not entirely sure that that's true, because just like the people sitting around the kitchen table, often it's the person online who speaks the most confidently, or the person who speaks the loudest, or the person who's the most sort of aggressive with their tone, or the way that they state the information, or maybe the infographic that they've put all that information in looks really pretty and looks really believable. And it actually is an awful lot like them sitting around the kitchen table and having one person really confidently say what they think about animal protein. Interestingly, even though we've given women access to hordes of information, what that has done is made women feel like they are responsible for becoming experts in all of these things, and probably slowing down their progress overall, and probably clouding what their next maneuver needs to actually be. Because rather than someone taking kind of an individualized look at what her strategy should be, she's getting the opinion of thousands of people, and some of them are just really loud people sitting at the kitchen table. My entrepreneurial women, though, however, are used to investing in people who are experts, They are used to recognizing that someone else might need to take the lead on strategy, right? They know that they are the creative and yet someone else needs to be the numbers person, or they're the numbers person, but they cannot figure out how to demonstrate the numbers in a way that makes their client to understand it. And so they bring in other experts, and that does a couple of things. I mean, one, it helps them acknowledge that they maybe don't have 100% of the skills in order for their project to get off the ground. Whereas I think when we relate that to health, women also often believe that there's something wrong with them, or that they are broken inside, or, that they are pathetic for not knowing everything that they need to know about how to execute a plan related to their health. Where very easily you can see that Sally needs an accountant, right? Sally is a painter and she needs an accountant. And yet women will feel this sort of level of shame if she can't seem to figure out, I'm saying in air quotes, what is best for her from a health perspective. But turns out that woman is a lawyer, right? And has no background and training in behavior change or in nutrition, and yet can feel quite shameful that she doesn't actually have all of those skills inside of her. Whereas my entrepreneurial woman very easily says, this is a skill set I don't have, and I'm going to bring someone onto my team who's actually going to help me execute. The other thing that does, though, for that woman is that absolves her from spending hours and hours and hours researching what a possible solution might look like. And so we're back to the time thing where my entrepreneurial women are not willing to spend hours on Google trying to figure out what this rash is, right? She can see that if she spends a little bit of time with an expert, that she might get the answer a heck of a lot faster. And if she gets the answer faster, then the solution is probably right around the corner. And that's something that she's willing to invest in time-wise and maybe expense-wise too, because she realizes that, sort of taking that, I'm not going to call it a shortcut, but it ends up being a shortcut versus this, I'm going to spend 50 hours online researching on my own. The last thing that I want to say that my entrepreneurial women do so well is they project manage. And I think that this is a skill or a concept in healthcare that we are not really emphasizing enough. So when you think about what your actual goals are and what you want to achieve for yourself and your health, it's probably something that is going to be achieved over many days and many months and maybe even years. And when we compare this against the dream and passion of my entrepreneurial women, none of them say, I want to start a catering company and I better be done by Friday, otherwise I'm a failure. Right? You would never, say that you're going to start writing a book. And if your book wasn't completely done and completely edited by the end of the month, that you were going to burn it, or whatever the virtual equivalent of burning paper is. So you can see that when we're project managing the dreams and hopes of our entrepreneurial women, those women have it in their mind already that executing on their dream requires a lot of steps. It requires planning. It probably requires some failure. It probably requires some, doubling back and fixing things that maybe didn't go so well the first time. It maybe requires some pivoting partway through if the results are not exactly what we hoped. And yet with a health goal, I think on paper we recognize, and I'm going to use weight management because that's one that always comes to mind, although I think there are many other health goals that are, probably could fit the same example. When we say to patients, your expected rate of weight loss should maybe be 0.5 pound to 1 pound a week. Patients go, okay, yep, that makes sense. And we say, but you just said you wanted to lose 20 pounds. And so that puts us at 40 weeks of planning and execution, provided that in none of those weeks, we don't get set back, or that you don't have something unexpected come up, or that you don't have Christmas, or that you don't have a wedding, or that you don't roll your ankle and can't go to the gym, right? And so when we start to look at it that way, we go, okay, well, maybe 40 weeks turns to 52, right? And maybe it would be reasonable for us to consider having that goal last over a year. And so my entrepreneurial woman who expects to launch her business in a year, she works on it every day, right? She thinks about all those small little chess moves that she needs to make. who she needs to talk to, what connections need to be made, what learning does she have to do, how much writing does she have to do, how much social media does she have to do in order to hit that goal a year from now. And yet, when we're starting to work on health goals, we very rarely view them from this project management perspective. We don't think about the infrastructure of the kind of food that we need to have in our house in order for us to be successful and always have something that we can make for lunch. We don't think about our other team members, right? We have our teenage kids bring home Chicago mix from Costco, and that's really going to get in the way of us achieving our goals. We don't have open conversations with our partners about what kind of support we would need from them in order for us to achieve our goal. We're not always looking at some of the obstacles that might come our way and how we might be able to overcome them. And often that means people are blindsided by the kind of food that's served at a baby shower, which means that they have a really difficult time keeping either their eye on their prize or them not sort of shaming themselves into a circle of despair and then not being able to stay on their plan on Monday morning. Whereas my entrepreneurial woman can see the forest for the trees. She can see that not every week is going to make good progress. She's going to see some weeks that literally feel like 10 steps backwards, but often involve a heck of a lot of learning about how she's going to get to the end goal. She can see that she needs to vocalize what her goal is. She needs to talk to her family about what her goal is. She needs to set aside time in order for her to actually do the things that she needs to do to achieve the goal. Somehow we're back on the time thing at the beginning. So I think it's really interesting because if we start to think about what it takes for a woman to get her passion project business off the ground, I actually want her to use those exact same skills to start to think about whatever her health goals are. So perhaps she wants to age, beautifully with grace and with her utmost health through menopause. That's not something that happens, in the last month that she's 49 before she hits 50, right? This is something that she needs to have thought about over time, that she's going to have to work on creating space for herself. She's going to have to think of a team of people that can actually elevate her and support her and hold her accountable. And she needs to actually break down what this project actually looks like and give herself the tasks that she needs to accomplish week over week, month over month, in order to 1 year from now be able to release her project, meaning herself, into the world with, having succeeded and achieved all of those goals. I want you to think about your health journey just like you would think about starting up your own business. I want you to think about those entrepreneurial women who value their time more than anything, value other people's expertise and time, and who can think about their life from a project management perspective and can realize that it takes thousands of chess moves for them to write the book or open the store or launch their company. And they apply those same principles when they're starting to think about their health. And I think that these are skills that we should really be considering adding as absolute necessity when we start to embark on any kind of health journey. Because whether or not you're trying to change your nutrition or improve your back squat or, transition through menopause with beauty and grace and ease and maybe a few less hot flashes, it all requires on some level us thinking about each of these three areas: that your time, the kind of expertise that you're willing to pull into your circle, and also having a goal and knowing that this goal is something that you are going to have to show up for every single day and execute just like we would execute any other big goal. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Women's Health Unplugged. It's my absolute passion to bring women quality and science-informed information about their health so that they can make empowered, good decisions about their healthcare. I'd like to invite you to join me in my Facebook community, Women's Health Unplugged. There we share live videos, blog posts, and behind-the-scenes information about the podcast where you can connect with me and other women who are interested in their healthcare. You can find us at facebook.com/groups/WH Unplugged. We'll see you there.